South America was long believed to be home to isolated peoples until the 16th century, but was this entirely true? Clues found in ancient culture and language may suggest that groups of people once traveled to the other side of the planet in the distant past. These recurring clues in language and culture may point to a time when people from opposite sides of the world were connected through trade, migration, or communication. There are many languages and cultures that have similarities, which I will cover, but the four major languages that have similarities are the native Inca language, Quechua, ancient India's language, Sanskrit, Maya, which is Mesoamerica, and the ancient Egyptian language. Egyptologists have never realized that the history of Egypt is filled with names belonging to the Andean people, names that can be perfectly translated into Runa Simi, the ancient language of the Apu Capac, or Quechua. Quechua speakers call themselves Runa, simply translated the people, so Runa Simi means Quechua people speakers. There are many claimed similarities between the Quechua and ancient Egyptian languages, and one place to begin is by analyzing the names of the ancient pharaohs such as Tutankhamun and Akhenaten. We discovered that many of them are names formed from roots of Runa Simi. I will be referring to the phonetics of Egyptian names. This is crucial to migration, as if migration during the ancient times was perhaps a one-way trip, and the most prevalent and thing to spread to other humans was the language and the culture. Even in Egyptian hieroglyphic writing, there are pre-American symbols and hieroglyphic symbols that represent pre-American names, as in the case of the hieroglyph that records the name of the Uru dynasty Peru, now Bolivia, and that in Egyptian hieroglyphic writing, the hieroglyph corresponds to this anthroponym that was recorded with the meaning of noble. The drawing shown here is showing an Egyptian hieroglyph that means Uru, with the translation of noble. The word Ra is not only Egyptian, it is also a root of Runa Simi and Sanskrit, the sacred language of India. Runa Simi is also very similar as original Sanskrit in its early stages of the language. It is part of the sacred word Kara, which means the warrior who goes at the head. The root Ra means the first. In Wara, the language of the first race that looks significantly different than the Incas, descended from Tiwanaku, and which was also made up of three branches: the Kara dynasty, the Iberian caste, and the Tipi-Wara ethnic group. Kara in that language also means the warrior who goes at the end. Many of the indigenous names from the Kingdom of Quitus, now Ecuador, are also Sanskrit words. In Sanskrit, the word Tut means night, or to darken. Meanwhile, in Runa Simi, Tuta means night. In addition, the word Ancas in Runa Simi means blue. Incas, as it is now written after Runa Simi, was manipulated by the Spanish friars. The pre-American languages and names were deformed, Hispanicized by the inquisitors, who had no interest whatsoever in knowing the phonetic norms or the spelling rules of the native languages. They never showed any interest in learning about the written symbols and writing systems, which are the supports of the native languages. To this day, in their dictionaries, they call the symbols scribbles, which reveals their stubborn ignorance, a folly inherited by the mestizo historians of American countries who dedicate themselves solely to submissively repeating what was imposed by force by the European colonizers. That is why, in this case, the letter K was replaced by C. In Spain, the letter K is called the unloved one because it has always been relegated since the introduction of Latin, and as for the letter N, it was an invention of scribes in medieval Spanish convents who, in order to extract information, came up with the idea of placing a small line above the N to indicate that this letter was doubled, and thus the Nye was born. In pre-Columbian writing systems, there is no written symbol to represent the N, so it is understood that a symbol corresponding to a double N, which sounds like Enye, was used. That is why in Quechua it is written Ancasñawi, which means a person with blue eyes. The correct spelling would be Ancasan Nawi, It is incorrect to use we, because the inquisitors also altered this and substituted the pre-American semi-consonant W with G, or with H joined to the diphthong, which is a glided vowel. Ua, ui, the H is Andean and has its corresponding symbol in the Tiwanaku scripture. This is explained in more detail, along with the table of the Tiwanaku script symbols and their legacy to other cultures of Asia, Europe, India, and other places. At first, it appears that the H was Hispanic, but delving deeper into this, it's Andean and has its own script symbol. Ancient humans have always based their language off of their environment, and we can verify the occurrence of the word by the blue flowers called Anca in the Montaro Valley and Huancayo, located in the modern country of Peru. In chapter 156 of the Egyptian Book of the Dead, or the chapter of the Buckle of the Carnelian, the procedure followed to charge the talisman of the knot of Isis with power is described. Before placing it around the neck of the deceased, it had to be submerged in water, which the sacred flowers called ankam had been previously soaked. Apart from the fact that the Isis knot has a very close relationship with the Hatun Kipus, or Kipu knots, which are instruments applied to advanced mathematics, formed by cords and knots, true ecological organizers of the solar dynasty of the Andes, mainly composed of the Apu Capac Incas in Peru, which, during the pre-American migrations, were spread to Asia, Egypt, and Europe in ancient times, leaving the cord and the knot as emblems of wisdom. Going back to the Egyptian pharaohs, some alternative linguistic interpretations suggest that the name Tutankhamun may contain parallels with the Runa Simi roots, Tut, which is night, Ankh, blue life symbolism, and Amun, the Egyptian deity. Under this interpretation, the name could be read as Blue Night of Amun. In another part of the world, in the Yucatan Peninsula in modern-day Mexico, the Mayans also had similarities to these words. In the Mayan language, there is the word Tut, which means in his presence, before him, in his house, or in his beard. In Maya, the translation would be in the presence of or before Amun. These similarities spread across the Americas. The Mayans play a great role in this cultural exchange because in the Mayan language, the word Aztut means to visit towns, which is a compound word, and the word Na means house of the council, or house of the community. There can even be similarities of these words shared with musical instruments used across the globe. Music instruments have always been a way to spread culture and language, but during the distant past, it was also incredibly sacred to people. Quena, or Quenya, as it is written today in Runa Simi or Quechua, translates as Indian flute made of bone of tibia. In Egypt, there is a city called Quena, and in ancient India, a sacred book called the Quena Upanishad. Akhenaten is famous for his poetic hymn to the sun. Interestingly, under Runa Simi interpretation, his very name is translated as the flute of the sun. Is this merely a coincidence, or could it point to shared cultural themes, language parallels, and the universal importance of solar deities across ancient civilizations? In Egypt, the word Atun or Atum is the name of the divinity of the rising sun and the honorific title received by the high dignitaries of the Inca court, which was Ancha Atun Apu Inti Puchuri, which means Great Lord, Son of the Sun. The second word, Atun, that makes up this title is the root from Runa Simi, from which the Egyptian word Atun or Atum is derived. As for Apu, it also appears in Egyptian hieroglyphs. In this drawing, the Egyptian hieroglyph containing the expression, O gods, which is transcribed as Apu. In the year 1458 BC, Thutmose III also campaigned in Nubia, establishing a provincial center at Napata near the fourth cataract of the Nile, a region that later became an important center for the worship of Amun. some alternative historical interpretations connect Napata Kari, the capital of Nubia, with the Egyptian term Karak, and propose that it was founded by the Karas, described in these theories as warriors who go at the head. According to this interpretation, the Karas were linked to the Wara people of Tiwanaku and were responsible for building pyramidal burial mounds of earth and stone in Nubia, similar to the Andean structures known as tulas or tolas. American archaeologist George Andrew Reisner excavated many tombs in Nubia and classified certain unidentified burials as Group X because he could not determine the culture responsible for them. Within these tombs, he uncovered silver artifacts decorated with precious stones, including crowns, bracelets, and earrings, as well as perforated ostrich eggshells tokens and other carved objects. Alternative interpretations suggest these symbols resemble Andean cultural motifs, including representations associated with a lunar dynasty such as the puma or lion emblem. Some researchers outside the academic mainstream propose that the perforated tokens discovered in Nubia were not merely decorative beads, as they were originally classified, but may instead have functioned as a type of moyu kipu. According to this interpretation, they represented a theoretical method of recording and organizing information similar to Andean quipus, or quipu rope. In this view, the objects could have been used as a form of an ecological information system, possibly serving purposes such as a calendar would, counting the days and years, or storing data through coded arrangements. I need to state here that it is important to note that these claims are highly speculative and are not accepted within mainstream archaeology or Egyptology. Current academic census holds that Nubian civilizations developed independently within northeastern Africa, and there is no verified archaeological evidence demonstrating direct contact between ancient Andean civilizations and ancient Nubia. This hypothesis is, as I mentioned before, only speculative, although I believe there was an unwritten movement of culture and language that crossed the globe during the ancient past. Another Egyptian toponyme, Saqqara or Saqqara, perhaps can derive or have influenced the language Runa Simi or Quechua, since in this primordial language there is a root word, Sakiri Grininia or Sakiri Grina, which means to go and stay. The Egyptian toponyme Saqqara or Saqqara suggests the following meaning derived from or influenced Runa Simi, the city of the warriors who came to stay. The anthroponym Kara means the warrior who goes at the head, and the Egyptian god's name Ra translates as the first. In the language of the Kuna or Tule people of Panama, the root word Saka is recorded Saka, lawgiver of extended family. Therefore, the name Saqqara or Saqqara of Egypt can also have ties to Mesoamerican culture and language. Furthermore, the descendants of the Kara race appear in the Srimad Bhagavatam with their anthroponym, forming part of the sacred syllable that all Nepophites, yogis, and the great spiritual masters constantly pronounce when meditating to attain enlightenment, Om Kara. Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the Bhagavad Gita says, of the letters, I am the Akara. Pushkara from the Vedas also had influence in Mesoamerica. It is also said that the word Ahamkara means the ego. The letter A, which is the first letter of the alphabet, appears in the Vedas as Akara. And the secret name of the Egyptian queen Hatshepsut was Ma'at-Kara. Both names are mentioned in Mesoamerica. Along with the Egyptian and Sanskrit language, the word Ma'at belongs to the Mayan language, which also means the meaning of gift or offering. Also, Kara is one of the dynasties of the water race, the first pale-skinned race that descended from Tiwanaku after the flood legend from the Aymaras. Other ethnic groups that were part of the Wada race were the Iberian dynasty and the Tupawara caste. All of these major languages have so many similarities that it's hard to say that they were completely disconnected or at least had little contact, because through language, like our modern languages, have many connections. We can even find similarities in the language of the Aztec civilization called Nahuatl. In this language, solar energy is designated with two names, Tonatiuh, which means it is the divine face of the primordial soul, source of light and life. The solar disk is its perfect symbol. Regarding this Nahuatl name of the sun god, it refers to its positive aspect, because its negative aspect was called Tezcatlipoca, the solar energy that can destroy. Tonatiuh is supposed to be authentically Nahuatl. It is actually composed of two roots from Runa Simi, and furthermore we can extract it from an Egyptian word. If we invert the two syllables of this name, Tona, or Tona, which is Atun, in Egyptian it's Tum or Atun, and Nahuatl it's Tonatiuh, which goes to Atontiuh. With the second part of the anthroponym, the result is first, the diphthong, tiu. This constitutes a root of Sanskrit and Quechua. The only difference that this Nahuatl anthroponym presents is that it has an H at the end. The word tiu in Sanskrit means sand, and similarly in Quechua or Runa Simi, tiu tiu means sandy desert. With this information, we can confirm a migration of language of the Andean people and the ancient Egyptians. In this case, two roots of Runa Simi appear in the name of the sun god of the Aztec civilization, and this Nahuatl name also contains a connection with Egypt, as it refers to the sun god Atum and the sandy desert where Egypt is located, along with the first ancient Peruvian civilization, the Karo Supe civilization, which is located in the northern sandy desert along the coast, which developed around 3000 BCE. Even the names of the sun god in Maya are Unanapu Vuch, which is the feminine principle, and Unapu Itui, which is the masculine principle. The last two syllables of the first name are composed of a word from Runa Simi, although the letter H has been added. Furthermore, Unapu, which is Maya, and Apu, which is Quechua. So in Quechua, Achuatunapu Inti Puchuri means Great Lord of the Sun, the solar essence of Apu Inti, or Children of Apu Capac, which means Children of Apu or Curaca, and in Quechua, Curaca means governor. And now the second name, Unapu Utiu, in the second part that composes it, Utiu, we discover that the diphthong tiu is a word from Sanskrit and Quechua. Tiu in Sanskrit means sand, and tiu tiu in Quechua means sandy desert. So in this case, we see that in the Mayan language, a U has been placed before it, utiu. There is a sacred word that also confirms the migrations of the Andean race or ancient Egyptians, and the contributions of Runa Simi to other native language of the north and center of the continent. The sacred word, which confirms the migrations made from the Andes to Central and North Preamerica, is Wakan. The explanation is as follows. The wife of Ayar Manco Topa is Mama Wakan. In Sanskrit, Ajar chief or primitive caste, Topas light or sun. Ayar Manco Tapa king or primitive caste of the worshippers of the light of the sun. This would stand as the root name of Mama Wakan or mother religion. The anthroponym Wakan reappears in Mexico, no less than as part of the name of the sacred city, where men became gods. That is, where they acquired great knowledge. In Nahuatl, or in the Mexica or Aztec language, it is Teotihuacan, which would mean sacred city where men became gods. The transcription of the transliteration in Quechua would be Teotihuacan. The sacred word Wakan was carried in the migrations from the Andes to the north of the continent, because again we find it forming part of the name given to the creator of the universe among the ethnic groups of the North American plains. This would be Wakan Tanka, or divinity of the cultures of North America, the great spirit of the great soul. In this last case, the term Tanka also exists in Quechua, but due to the limited knowledge of the editors of the dictionary of the Major Academy of Quechua, it has been recorded with a meaning very far removed from the true translation it should have, because Tanka is actually the designation for the types of textile books from the Andes that were taken to Tibet by the Kampa people, whose origin is Peru and who are the founders of Tibet. According to this, the actual translation of the name applied to the deity of the Native American nations, Wakan Tanka, can also be interpreted as sacred book. The relevance of the discovery is that it demonstrates a unity in their religious philosophy across all the nations of Preamerica, or it compels us to unify knowledge in order to determine whether the migrations truly took place from south to north, which is most likely, since I have managed to identify here that the sacred root T, which forms part of several names of sacred pre-American cities, was carried by Andean sages who traveled to China. There is irrefutable evidence confirming that Preamerica was not an invention of the Chinese but had an influence over the language, as the thesis of the French anthropologist Paul Rivet confirms that there are gaps in Chinese history regarding the origin of the Chan, Chu, and Wan cultures, which cannot be explained, and since the Chan culture emerged in China when the Chinese people were in a primitive state, it was an influence to the evolution of the language. And with the conviction that the Chan-Chanes, or Classic Maya, who settled in the kingdom of the Quitus, which is composed of several states, then traveled to India where they instructed the Brahmins in cosmogony, sciences, arts, and languages. Over long periods of time and generations, this ethnic group traveled and spread their culture until establishing themselves in Central America, where they found great cities. The Maya called themselves Chan-Chanes, meaning the snake people. They bequeathed to China their real name, Chaner, and the foundations of their culture, the paper industry. While this evolved differently in China, a study of Chinese symbols confirms a strong relationship with Mayan writing. The Chinese still preserve and use the writing symbols of the Chan dynasty. They also carried out hydraulic engineering works similar to those that they had undertaken in pre-Columbian America. They established the unification of states, languages, and writing systems, which was a religious, philosophical, social, and political system of the Andes called the religious philosophy of the cosmic community. This philosophy of unity is governed by the communal order of the cosmos and by respect for all living entities, because it considers that however humble that entity may be, it is fulfilling a mission in the universe for the common good. And this is the basis of Taoism, which was transmitted to China by a Mayan ethnic group, the Sumu, Taos, or Misios. That is why Confucius advocates the search for unity in his works and prophesies that in the future, a world community of nations would be organized under just laws based on the cosmic order. There is also an ethnic group in China called Ti. The creator of the universe was called Wanti. Ti in Aymara, or a branch of Runa Simi, means the flood. It is the syllable that begins the sacred toponym Tiwanaku. And Shi Huangdi was a mythical Chinese emperor who undertook the unification of China, following pre-American organizational principles, because he sought the unity that is the basis of pre-American religious philosophy. It is said that this Chinese emperor changed the course of the Yellow River. This is also a pre-American system, changing the course of rivers so that they adapt to the urbanization system to which the cosmic order was applied. For example, in Mayan territory, an outstanding work of hydraulic engineering was carried out. The Mayan engineers changed the course of Uxmatcinta River. The Chronicles of China mention the Wan dynasty of princes. These individuals could very well belong to the elite of Tawan Tinsuyu or to the Wanka Wilka dynasty. The Andean Wilkas were the wise men of royal blood who instructed the emperors. Who were these ancient travelers who carried their language, culture, and beliefs across continents, leaving traces that echoed through civilizations over time? Could these people be the ancient bearded travelers that the Aymara and Peruvian folklore mention that were part of their creation? This is another mystery apart from phonetics that I'm explaining. Even Confucius, who descended from the Chan dynasty, exhibited the transformation of the skull, a distinctive feature for which he received the name Kon, and to bury his parents he built a tumulus or pyramid of packed earth and stones. A pre-American construction system, tombs belonging to the Wara race, formed by three ethnicities: the Kara dynasty, the Iberian ethnicity, and the Tupi-Wara caste, or the Hittites, who built this type of tomb called tulas or tolas, pronounced indifferently, because the O did not have the symbol to represent it as a letter, but was a variation of the sound of the letter U or U. In his philosophical system, he advocates life in community and predicts that the communal way of life will prevail in the future. He speaks of a great universal community, whose principles are the foundations of the pre-American religious philosophy of the cosmic community. The mysterious name of Lao Tzu's philosophical system, the Tao, is also a philosophical system belonging to the Sumo Mayan people, who were also called Taos or Misios. There is even a place in New Mexico called Tao. The philosophical essence of Lao Tzu is harmony with the laws of nature, the worship of nature, which is also one of the pillars of pre-American religious philosophy. There are mysteries surrounding the origin of this Chinese philosopher. In the Tao Te Ching, he advocates life in an ideal society in harmony with nature, in which all historical events would be recorded on knotted cords or string. Pretty much sounds like the Qipu rope from Andean culture. Lao Tzu envisions the use of ecological computers, high mathematical instruments used by the lunar and solar dynasties throughout the Andean region. The elite Qipu Kamoyoks, men and women expert in high mathematics from both dynasties, created the Moyu Qipus and the Hatun Qipus. They devised the oldest techniques for information management, successfully implemented since the antediluvian era. Their ecological computers perform the functions of a modern computer. These sages created a computer network throughout Tawantinsuyu, or the Inca Empire, with a central computer in the Rey Palace. Knotted rope was one of the most effective forms of communication, but the written methods were also very similar as well. They also had symbols in their religion and culture reused over millenniums, which was imprinted into stone, clay, or primitive paper. These periods of American history include the Archaic period and the older Lithic stage. Here we see a Mayan statue with crossed arms, a pose commonly found in many Maya and Aztec statues. Even in Ecuador, at the Museum of Casa del Alabado, we find the same arm positions on these two statues. These are also common in South America. This same position of the arms also shows up in Egypt. Here's the grandfather of King Tut, Yuya, that is mummified. We also see this specific hand gesture displayed, which is common for this specific belief. People living during the past probably did not understand skeletal anatomy in the modern scientific sense, but many ancient cultures almost certainly learned through the process and experience of supine burial that positioning the arms crossed over the chest or abdomen helped keep the body in an orderly position. This real 1700s painting of Atahualpa, now housed at the Brooklyn Museum, shows two facing serpents adorning his crown. The facing serpents were not just some type of cross of snakes, but they depicted the sun and moon in Inca cosmology, which is also the lunar dynasty and the solar dynasty in ancient Hinduism. We even see the same design on a jasper cylinder seal from Iraq, dating back thousands of years to the Uruk period. This early seal depicts lion-headed eagles and two cephalopods, which are mythical long-necked lion beasts. In this ancient Egyptian palette depicting King Ahasuerus, we see the long-necked felines intertwined and facing one another, and the royal falcon, which resembles the Halka Marie, emblem of the solar dynasty of the Andes, accompanies the king on the standard and receives in Egypt the name of Horus, which means the distant one. Even in this similar palette, it depicts King Horus again when being enthroned, receiving the title of Na-Mer. It is a war scene in which he takes a prisoner, and the royal falcon keeps count of the dead in the battle. In the upper part preceding the image appears the goddess Bat. The kilt of Horus bears some symbols that are from Preamerica. In the very top part of this palette, we see the similar bull horns. On the opposite sides of the earth, both locations share the same snake and bull symbols depicted in the same positions. This is apparent in the same religious cult that have similarities with the word Aten. The hieroglyph of the Egyptian name for Aten is formed by a pre-American writing system. This symbol is a circle with a line. This is just one of many similar symbols that was used from ancient Egypt to Proto-American civilizations. These symbols may reveal a forgotten connection between the language systems of ancient Egypt and Proto-America, where shared ideas, meanings, and visual depictions of words appear to echo across two distant civilizations. Beyond culture and language, ancient humans also express identity through their physical appearance. Across many of these civilizations that share similar linguistic patterns, we also find the practice of depicting or shaping elongated heads. Here's a limestone portrait head of one of the daughters of Akhenaten and Nefertiti from the 18th dynasty, 1345 BC, now on display at the Egyptian Museum of Berlin. This practice was repeated on the other side of the world. These two civilizations shared the same practice of elongating the skull during childhood. This was believed to bring them closer to royalty and to being in the same spiritual realm of their gods. In many ancient civilizations, this practice was mainly associated with royalty and religious elites, suggesting that the tradition spread alongside their culture across different parts of the world. These skulls shown here are from the museum in Paracas, Peru, South America. Once again, another striking similarity between ancient Egypt and South America reveals itself, as the higher classes of both cultures, those closely connected to language, tradition, and religion, also shared and preserved this practice among their elites. We can only imagine whether this practice influenced their way of thinking or the behavior associated with living as an upper-class individual. What we do know is that this tradition eventually spread beyond the elite and became present among many ancient civilizations. Throughout this book, we have seen how these ancient peoples carried their knowledge across the ancient world, spreading their culture, language, and ideas from one civilization to another during the past. Yet, the mystery still remains. Who were these ancient travelers that journeyed between distant lands, exchanging the very foundations of their world?